All right, we're live again. Thank you for still sticking with us. If you've not done so yet, look at these guys. They're sitting in their houses. Everybody's sitting in their houses. If you have a chance, take a picture of your work from home setup and put that on Twitter. We're all sharing where we are. Brian and Chris are in their actual houses. I'm sent off to the garage, so I guess not everybody is that lucky. From all over the world, actually. I'm in Amsterdam. Chris is in New York, and Brian, you're in the Boston region. I'm very excited about this talk myself because these are people that are actually on the front line. Now, I'm in an office comfortably just answering emails, but these guys get to do stuff with Citrix and VMware environments every day. They are a little bit nervous. Can I see your hands, guys? I heard there were some sweaty palms. So don't worry, there's just 1,000 people here in this session. Nothing to worry about, guys. If they have questions, you can put them in the chat. And they'll try to get back to you and answer them. And with that, I would like to give the microphone to Brian.
Awesome. Thanks for that introduction, Mark. Appreciate that. So today we're going to talk about how Roswell utilized Login VSI's enterprise software to improve some user experience and their kind of journey along that process. I also have with me Chris Stack, and we'll do a bit of introduction here before we get going. So my name is Brian Martynowicz. I'm the Director of Customer Services for Login VSI. I've been working with Login VSI for 4 years. I've seen a lot of very interesting deployments, and I'm really excited to talk about Roswell specifically. So I'll let Chris say hi to everybody.
Hello, everyone. I'm Chris Stack. I've been with Roswell for almost 18 years, started on ground floor on the service desk, transferred over to the server team after 3 years. Been there since.
Yeah, so Chris is a pillar of their IT institution. So a little bit about Roswell before we dive into the meat and potatoes here. It's a 4,000 employee healthcare system in Buffalo, New York. Lots of outpatient visits as well. It was actually founded in 1898, which is a long time ago for American standards. Mark might not agree with that, but it's a long time ago for us. And you'll also notice they were ranked number 14 in the country last year for hospitals. So pretty impressive there. I'm going to turn it over to Chris now, and Chris is going to tell you guys a little bit of history about their IT infrastructure deployment and what they're doing with it.
So yeah, so back in 2005, we started out with Citrix Presentation 4.5 as well as Allscripts. We had that in line up until about 2011 when we built our secondary farm, a 6.5 farm, as well as our new 15.1 version of Allscripts. At that point, we were able to run 632 users on 9 servers without any performance issues. And actually, that was only half our farm. We were doing maintenance on the other half.
What I found really interesting about this too, Chris, was 632 is a large quantity of users for 2011, I believe. You guys were pretty early on in the game of centralizing applications. Would you say that's accurate?
I would, and actually it goes to show you how the technology, hardware as well as application-wise, has changed and become more cumbersome since then.
So then you were telling me in 2017, you guys hit a little bit of a snag, which kind of led to us being introduced to each other.
Correct. So in 2017, we decided to build out a new farm, XenApp 7.12, and unfortunately we made the mistake of not doing any load testing whatsoever, whereas previously we had used Citrix EdSite. This time EdSite wasn't available, and it kind of bombed out for us. But we learned from that because back in 2019, building out our final farm, 7.15 LTSR, that's when we contacted Brian and VSI and all that.
So I have a quick question about 2017 before we move on. How did you guys solve those problems? Because you were telling me something that seems like it's a pretty common thread amongst companies nowadays.
So the initial, the way we had set it up, we had built out 30 servers, Citrix servers to host EHR. And after we went live, we had many performance issues. Just right off the bat, because it was affecting business, we had to double our servers to 60 Citrix EHR servers.
I don't imagine that was cheap.
And no, we had to buy more hosts for our VMware environment. Yeah, it was, and it took us almost 2 months to tweak it and get it where we needed to be.
Yeah. But then eventually you kind of ironed things out and people were able to do their jobs, right?
We did. Right. But it was a mistake we learned from. And we will never do it.
So going into 2019, you guys obviously had some migration concerns. You didn't want to find yourself in the position that you were in before, right? So, you know, there's a list of laundry items here. I didn't want to you know, be exhaustive about reviewing it, but I would say that a lot of people share these concerns. Would you agree?
Oh yes, we had the applications, we had management, we had everybody involved. As you can see from the list here, most of it was hardware. We didn't want to go above and beyond and waste resources as well. We wanted to make sure that once we went live, we were confident that, you know, we would not have any slowness, performance issues whatsoever.
Right. So basically you guys did something smart, which was that you set some requirements before you moved over, right?
Right. So we wanted to do a load test, especially the stress test. One thing when we finally considered going with you guys, I know the application vendor mentioned that we would be okay with 25 users per server.
That's right.
We actually proved that to be wrong with the load testing.
That's right. We did.
Yes, I believe our VSI max was like 21, 23, somewhere around there.
That's after we made some tweaks, if you remember correctly.
It is. It is. We wanted to mimic our actual environment because obviously we're 24/7 operation.
Right.
And you know, you don't have the same amount of users on the system. So we wanted to get it seemed about every 17 seconds, we were having users log in.
Right.
And then we had our peak time. So we wanted to mimic that, and we were able to do it with VSI.
Yeah, I remember. So you guys set some goals for yourselves. You wanted to look at response times for application transactions. In this instance, you know, that EHR solution for you guys, Allscripts. You also wanted to observe the underlying components and the way that they responded. You know, this organically touched all of the various components, including database, network. It would identify software design flaws. And you're going to do that through load testing. So that's what you guys set out to do, right?
Right. And I don't know if I'm jumping ahead, but I do want to point out with that slide.
Don't spoil any surprises.
Prior to migrating over, our Citrix login time for EHR was almost 1.5 minutes to 1 minute and 50 seconds.
That's right.
And after we implemented it, we got it down to almost 18, 17 seconds for basic connection, and then
log in.
Right.
Right.
Which is
that's amazing.
Yes. Yeah, we got a lot of compliments on it. I mean, everybody was, wow, can't believe this is possible.
Floored, right, exactly. And it directly translates in the ability to deliver care to those end users, which are your patients at the end of the day when we're talking about healthcare. So you guys wanted to guarantee the performance of your clinicians, your nurses, your doctors. So you guys were looking at HPE Synergy servers, Server 2016, 4V CPU, 16 gig of RAM, machine profiles sitting on top of ESX. And obviously that machine profile wasn't of your specification. That's probably what the manufacturer told you that you were supposed to configure it for. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So how did we end up testing all of this? Well, we took our login VSI virtual user technology. We created a set of workload interactions that would drive user behavior within Allscripts. You can see the set of interactions that our virtual user would perform. And then we logged a bunch of these virtual users into Roswell's pre-production environment on the new hardware to determine some things like those goals that were represented in a few slides previously. Here's a visualization of the virtual user actually plugging away against an Allscripts instance. I thought that this was particularly compelling because, you know, we're talking about a lot of this in theory, but actually seeing and being able to visualize what that looks like, I think that that's pretty impactful. So we started doing some iterative testing cycles with you guys, right, Chris?
Correct.
If you guys noticed at the beginning of our presentation, Chris had talked about that Allscripts was telling them for their particular configuration, they should get about 25 users per VM. And if your estimation is off on a VM level, it's probably off on a node or cluster level as well. So we tested an individual VM, and you can see that the performance was perfectly fine for about 15 users. Would you say that's about right, Chris?
Correct. And that's currently that is what we are limiting our servers to, 15.
Correct.
15 users. And again, that depends because you have different workloads. You have, you know, from an administrative assistant just looking up a scheduled date to, as you saw in that demo there, going in with a full workload.
Right. And so you guys didn't set up every single scenario, but you found a safe point basically after you optimized.
Correct. It was
and so
an average workload.
Right. And then so we started to scale up, right? So then we went to 150 users, which would represent, you know, 10 virtual machines. And what did we decide was the name of that individual infrastructure unit? Node? Host, right?
Correct.
So this was a single host, and then we scaled up to this was how many hosts, Chris?
This was 4 hosts.
This was 4 hosts, right?
We had also done a 300 test, and
yep.
That was with 3 hosts. The 150 was with 2. And I believe
and so obviously there's more hosts than this in the total production environment, but you guys had a pretty large sample size at this point, right?
Yes, and we're averaging about 10 target machines or virtual machines per host.
So then I included this screenshot just to show what that analysis of the test results will look like in our newest platform, which I'll cover as far as long-term goals for Roswell here in a moment. But I wanted to also talk about some testing cycles that you guys had gone through and where you guys are kind of headed before we cap off and actually show some data representative of the tweaks that we had made. So do you want to talk about this a little bit, Chris?
Right. So when we initially started back in September, this was when we had gone from our 7.12 environment to 7.15 LTSR. It was the same version of EHR, which was 16.3 at the time. I think that was our initial testing results that we saw earlier.
Yep.
And then in January, we were changing our version of EHR from 16.3 to 18.4. So again, we want to do load testing, especially like I mentioned earlier, with how the application becomes cumbersome throughout time. And you can see just with these 2 versions, we had to do some more load testing.
Now, Chris, that's a 4-month difference. That's a pretty fast testing cycle for a hospital. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I would, but we were able to pull it off with VSI. I mean, I'll be honest, you know, the application's great, very user-friendly. It was really able to help us out. And even now, as you can see from the final part of this, we're utilizing the Login Enterprise continuous monitoring.
Yeah, exactly. That's what we're building towards.
Right. So we'll be testing this out constantly on a daily basis and reviewing the results.
Right, exactly. You'll keep driving those user behaviors into production. So wanted to just kind of demonstrate what that looks like a little bit here. You'll be using it for change management, monitoring your application performance. So that same set of workload behaviors that we had utilized to baseline during your pre-production testing, we can now run on a continual basis and alert when even granular application transaction SLAs are exceeded. And then just from a base and generic level, we'll be able to log in there through your NetScalers, your storefront servers, retrieving that ICA file. And it doesn't matter, what endpoint the user is sitting on. So this is kind of what a view of what the new modern dashboard looks like. So then I wanted to talk about some outcomes, and we'll actually drive into some test results and show how that kind of progressed as time went by. Mm-hmm. So Chris, you want to talk about this?
Sure. So as you can see from the outcome, one of the things is we really didn't find any areas that we needed improvement. As I told you, our login times were amazing. We were able to figure out how many servers, how many hosts, exactly what hardware was required. It gave us a true picture of how we are, running now performance-wise, how many we can handle, and as we bring more staff on board, how much we can actually handle before we have to increase our resources.
Right, excellent.
And obviously the most important is it did give us the confidence to move forward with the migration.
Yeah, I think that's a big one. I mean, that's really something that you can't quantify. I know, with projects like this, there's a certain level of uncertainty associated with kind of pushing that boat into the open seas. And if you've simulated that as thoroughly as Roswell had, I'm sure that gives you a lot better feeling, when that actually happens.
And when you're running with the project, it's kind of nice when you see everybody in the room wearing their fuzzy bunny slippers.
That's right. So
okay, everybody's on board, feels good.
So just to cap that off before we actually start driving through some of the results that you guys have achieved, like what was the response to launching the new latest and greatest on the new hardware with the new virtual machine configurations and limitations and all the testing that you guys had done? What was ticket volume like? What was people's response to it?
So prior to going live with our results and everything, we did get a lot of tickets. The service desk got a lot of tickets with slowness of the application. And again, EHR is our biggest application at Roswell, obviously.
Right. Critical.
Exactly. And slowness with the EHR, many Citrix resets because of performance issues within EHR on sessions. So we actually had, as you can see from this part of the slide, Allscripts come in, and they gave us the recommendations of how we needed to proceed with the, start to proceed with this whole migration.
So can you talk about that a little bit? So you guys went directly to the manufacturer, and they have a services or consultancy arm that they will send people out to Roswell to analyze the systems?
Well, actually, I wasn't involved too much in it, but I can tell you at this time we had a new CIO jump on board.
Okay.
And he said, enough is enough. And he contacted Allscripts, and they were willing to come in and on site and, review the system, review Citrix. We even actually had Citrix come in too. Again, they started reviewing, everything where they could tweak, gave us their recommendations. So for, I'd say the first 4, 5, 6 months, it was a lot of working together between the two major vendors. Right, and figuring out, what we needed to do and how to move forward.
So in February, you guys brought in Citrix Consulting as well?
Correct.
Right. Now you have both teams taking a look. So I'm assuming they made some sort of performance appraisal during a duration of time. They made a bunch of findings and conclusions, and they created an action plan.
They did. And as a matter of fact, we have what we call our war room. It's our big office space that we actually had them in there together. So it was like, we're all working hand in hand. It wasn't like we had them in separate times, separate hours. we really wanted nobody to be able to finger point to anybody else
Right.
and, identify what the issues were. It wasn't only like in one place performance-wise. Sometimes it was application, other times it could have been a tweak here or there with the Citrix environment.
So, based upon that, and you guys had identified some key areas to improve and optimize, and you started upgrading to a new Citrix environment.
Well, actually, what we did is we started building another Citrix environment on the side, and that was a 715.
Gotcha.
Because we didn't, again, want to intrude on the current environment with user performance and such. So we started building out our 7.15 LTSR with the recommendations you saw earlier.
Yep.
While users were still able to work and take care of patients.
Perfect. And then, so I'm guessing you guys played around with different provisioning technologies here.
Right. So yeah, so we jumped into Citrix PVS here. Again, this was to help out with the resources and building out our VMs. And as you can see also so far, you see our numbers are decreasing too.
Yeah, so they're finally starting to decrease. So I'm assuming that this is now you guys taking actionable items against what you guys had learned in January, February, and March.
Right.
This is where you guys introduced some new hardware. So we talked about the HPE Synergy servers. So you're looking at the Gen 10 where you had previously looked at 8 and 9, right?
Correct. So previously we had a hybrid of Gen 8s and 9s. And then here, as you stated, as you can see, we introduced Gen 10s. For our 7.15 environment, we had Gen 9s and 10s. And then later on throughout, and again, not jumping ahead or trying to, but we kind of restricted Citrix and EHR, just the Gen 10s.
Yep, exactly. So then you guys did some upgrades on your front end, it looks like, your gateways.
Correct. This again is where we were upgrading our NetScaler to the latest and greatest, as well as Storefront for the 7.15 migration. So you can see, like, each month we're different. We were completing different parts of the migration.
Exactly. And then, so this is where we had come in initially.
Yes, correct.
So go ahead and talk about that a little
we contacted you. You guys were, again, awesome. Even before the ink was dry, we were already working on this.
Exactly. All right. So here's the really impressive part, and I may be a little bit biased here. So now you're moving over to XenApp 7.15. You're doing the upgrade and migration. You'll notice those transactionary times in seconds here continuing to decrease. You are optimizing and fine-tuning of the Citrix environment. And how are you doing that exactly, Chris?
Let's see. So just again, by fine-tuning, what we're doing is we're able to look at the reports from what we had from VSI, see exactly what's going on by investigating Citrix as well, seeing where the hangups were. It wasn't the resources at all. It was just little tweaks in the application on EHR as well as Citrix.
That's right. So it wasn't even a hardware constraint issue. It was more configuration optimization gains that you made out of that. So you can see that CCM, so SCOM 18 upgrade and GPO optimization. And the same thing holds true in these instances. We're doing A/B comparison testing to determine whether or not those changes has a positive or negative net effect. And then continuing app migration of legacy Citrix environment, you guys will continue to make improvements. But what I really thought was interesting about this is it does definitely show a progression and improvement at the logon basis for those applications through Citrix, right? But it also then precipitated in performance increases in those applications across the board realistically. So I know we're kind of starting to run low on time, and I wanted to make sure we have enough time to answer some questions, because I see some questions going off in the QA and in the chat. So let's wrap up. Chris, you want to offer some conclusions for everyone?
Okay, so as I stated, we were able to have a successful migration. No complaints whatsoever, minimal user impact because we ran it side by side. Again, all the results we learned from the load testing was just spot on.
Stable environment, vendor approved the tweaks and performance gains that you had because you offered them irrefutable empirical data set. You're able to make sure that it's now more secure by updating those NetScalers and storefront servers, and you have that baseline set of data to continue to grow off of. The last thing I really wanted to talk about is a fundamental shift in business that we're seeing, and I'm sure you know, this is true of most of our audience here. Most likely, offices are being forced to shut down. You have a model where you had users in these large office spaces now being forced to disperse, all remotely connecting in. And I don't think that that's a trend that we're going to see kind of roll back. I think that more and more as companies kind of find out that the work from home model is effective, it's kind of going to stick. The need for companies to respond quickly and faster than before as well. You know, you saw through the demonstration that Chris just walked you through that, I mean, in 4 months, they were able to do some evaluation of these necessary changes. And I would say that that's pretty quick, especially in highly regulated healthcare industry. And we're also seeing a lot of our customers are now exploring cloud, and even in HIPAA regulated environments, as not only a stopgap measure, but I think personally, again, we don't see those users then pull those end users back off the clouds once they're there. So any other fundamental shifts that you're seeing, Chris? Or
no, except for, you know, with the current events going on, we really had to make some changes with VDA. We had to provide VDA and VDI solutions, which we were able to successfully do. We had the extra resources due to the load testing that we're able to utilize for that response.
Yeah, I thought that that was really cool too. You said that you were installing VDA agents on people's desktops and using Citrix to broker them. I think that's really like a brilliant solution, obviously.
And the staff is actually stating it's like working right at their desk in the office. And, you know, we had it up and running in 6 days. You know, we had a few issues, but now at this point, within 2 weeks, running smoothly. And,
that's fantastic. Mark, I think we got about 2 minutes left. Are there any key questions that we can answer for the audience?
Yeah, there's actually a lot of questions coming in. So I was able to answer a few of them already via text. So that was good. So because sometimes they're, you know, aligned with the slide that you're on, so it makes no sense to wait. But there was actually one coming in from Mr. Anonymous that I found intriguing. And that is, how would you recommend approaching testing a large set of applications, say 50 or 60 per server? Do you have any insights on that maybe, Brian?
Absolutely. I mean, again, I'll be a little bit biased here, but it's very easy to add applications to our enterprise platform. You literally just specify where that EXE lives within that VDA image. So you just add the apps in first to get that start and stop data, and then you start to kind of flesh out the workloads from there. What we see is a lot of people try to kind of, you know, take off a large bite and get everything done all at once. And that's really not something that I can recommend doing. What I really suggest is kind of starting at a smaller level, like you saw in our presentation. Roswell was testing an individual VM with 15 users. You kind of start there with the out-of-the-box workloads and kind of build up to that full volume. Hopefully that answered the question. Oh.
I think it did. So Chris, then I have one more question for you. Based on the optimizations, what was the final number of users that they could fit on the box? That's a question from John.
So we decided that we would utilize 15 users because of the workloads on the server. But we have been able to get it up to 18, even 21, but at 21, we started noticing performance issues.
All right. Well, I think that answers the questions. I saw the same question coming in a few times about this number, so it must be very interesting. I think it's about time to jump off to the next speaker. So, Chris, thanks a ton for being here today with us in this event. Brian or Chris, do you have any last words that you'd wish to say to the speakers or to the attendees?
Yeah, I'll go first. I really want to show my appreciation for Chris. I know that this is a very difficult time for healthcare. I really appreciate Roswell volunteering his very critical time to share this story with everyone. So I'm very grateful for that.
Okay, and I'd like to say, please do load testing. We learned from it once, and BSI is the way to go. And the support's A+.
Oh, thank you.
Stay safe and healthy.
Very kind.
Oh, Brian made you say that. So thank you very much, guys.
I didn't even get paid for it either.
So thank you very much, guys. Next session, next up is Rody Kossen in a few minutes. He's a Citrix CTP, and he will tell you all about remoting protocols and their effects on user experience. And with everybody working remotely, I think that's a very interesting topic. So see you all in a few minutes, and thanks for joining.
Thanks so much.
Take
Bye.
care.